Hey everyone, in our latest Trade to Black podcast, we sit down with former CEO of Canopy Growth, Bruce Linton, who takes us back to August 2018, the day that Constellation Brands handed him a $5 billion check, probably the biggest moment this industry has ever experienced. So what exactly happened that day? He walks us through how it all went down right now on our latest podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to the Trade to Black podcast. I'm your host, Shadd Dales, and as usual, before we get into the nitty-gritty of this podcast, all views on the Trade to Black podcast, the guests on this podcast are purely opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or our guests as investment advice. The views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. Let's begin, and look who's here, our guest of the week, former CEO of Canopy Growth, now chairman of the board at Red Light Holland and advisor of Creso Pharma, Bruce Linton. How are you, sir?
Well, I do like your disclaimer at the beginning. I think I'm just going to get a t-shirt with that shit right on it. Right? I'll just walk around because I'm spouting off all day long. I should probably have that like front and center as my disclaimer.
Yeah, we kind of learned the hard way. We got to make sure that's front and center all the time. You start a media company, next thing you know, you go down a road that you didn't know existed. So you make sure that comes front and center. Also joining us as usual, TDR's lead financial writer, Benjamin A. Smith. Ben, how's it going, brother?
It's going very well. Good to see you guys. I see the Fed just hiked 75 basis points, so we got some very volatile and interesting times. It's unbelievable what's going on right now.
Yeah,
75 basis points.
And then said, get ready for more. It's going to be like 3.5 by the end of the year as the base rate.
Whoa.
Yeah, there's
So-
as much as. So like the potential overhang, that's serious overhang.
Let's start with that macro question. Like, I know where we are right now as far as economy is, and it's not good. Where do you see this going, Bruce, over the next 6 months?
Well, it kind of even goes back a little further, right? Like there was a whole bunch of things that probably weren't working, but all the COVID cash kept them working.
Yep.
Right? You drop the money into everybody's hands, they spend the money, you bail out some businesses, and so that kind of keeps it going. And then all of a sudden, you take that away, you got a bunch of funky supply chains, and you got opportunistic exploitation of certain things like oil and gas. You put a lot of torque on it. I still don't understand how interest rates have anything to do with it. I don't think people are buying tons of shit because interest rates are low.
Right.
Even low forever.
Yeah.
So like I struggle a little bit with, I think this could be a faster fix than most people think, and maybe it's because I'm an optimist. But I think that there's a lot of torque.
You want to
and
elaborate
value.
on that as far as a faster fix?
Can't make cars because don't have chips. Well, you know what? They'll figure out how to make more chips faster. Can't get wheat from Ukraine. Bet they'll figure out how to pull it out of reserves elsewhere. So I think like the pressure on price might be more reasonably responded to through the fact that businesses and supply chains will change faster than the interest rate would cause a change in behavior. So I think we could get well quick. And last thing I'll say on it, we've gotten used to every year markets about this time of year should go horribly down, and then by the end of the year they should be wildly up. Well, we've done that for a couple of years, right? So I think these fast flips are kind of freaky, but they're becoming the norm.
Yeah. Ben, I know this is your baby. There's a lot of questions you probably want to ask Bruce, so fire away.
Yeah, I mean, those are interesting points, Bruce, how you comment that people will adapt. The market will adapt quicker, right? Don't have chips now, somebody else will pop up with supply. And, obviously there's going to be a little bit of a time lag on that, but it's totally true. Now, the one question that I have is, how effective is Fed monetary policy going to be in this time? Because it's very effective against a demand cycle. Especially where they can subdue demand, and this still will happen. But a lot of the problems that we're facing now are supply chain issues, like the oil problems stemming from Ukraine and no Russian oil, and also the breakdown of the supply chains in a lot of ways are creating more cost push inflation as opposed to demand push inflation. So that's my only question: how effective Fed policy is going to be in this particular cycle?
I think it may have an unintended consequence, meaning. I bet it sponsors renewed discussions about pipelines, both across borders, across countries to Pacific ports. I bet it sponsors like things that were put to bed because oil is dead and we'll never need this. And now when it gets expensive, we still need it. I think some of this squish where it hurts everybody with interest rates is going to have us talking about and we've had all these discussions about onshoring supply chains.
Mm-hmm.
Inherently, that could be terrible because that's usually they've been offshore because they're actually more price competitive.
Right.
So when you onshore, you might actually build in some permanent base price increase. All these conversations, I think, start kicking in again because of the interest rate.
Do you think there's an agenda here?
I don't think, I wish I could believe the conspiracy theorists that there's somebody who's got a whole big plan for the whole big thing. I don't think so. Like, I think we have a whole bunch of actors who are reacting. Probably the only two of them that have a plan are running Russia and China. And I bet they're collaborating on who's moving when and where.
Well, we were
But
talking
after that, I think
even earlier this week, some of the media companies were saying that home prices in the GTA, which seems to be like real estate is strong in Toronto, that home prices were down 36%. However, when you look at home values year over year, it's still up another 18%. So I think there's a lot of, like you said, when COVID first hit and the market collapsed, a lot of people are freaking out, is what I think.
Yeah, I feel the sort of the nut negative. I always end up cheering for the low guy. It's the person who's got that first townhouse,
Yeah.
and that they were making the payments and they're okay. I worry about that person's ability to retain the townhouse on the income they had with the pressure on. That's who's going to get bit in the ass more than somebody buying a big McMansion in Toronto.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
They
now
like to
Bruce,
make some money on some stocks.
Right. Exactly.
yeah, speaking of stocks, I wanted to ask you about a couple things. First of all, Canopy Growth. I don't know if you can comment on it or to what extent, but it's reached multi-year lows. I think to levels we haven't seen since basically the beginning when it was Tweed, or close to that point. And also, what's your take on the Canadian cannabis sector? Because this week an Canadian investment bank came out and said basically don't expect any growth in the industry for a couple of years. And you have all sorts of problems with Hexo, renegotiating debt came out today, and it just like, what's your take on this? Like, where did it all go wrong?
Well, there's like two or three things in there. So, in sequence, to me, like Canopy was built to be a global leader, meaning top three position in any segment in any market, and do so through scale, platform, and innovation, which really is science, which drives products. That means when you have market share, even if the market's only growing, it's still growing. Every market for cannabis is growing. It just depends the rate and geography. I don't think anybody said it is shrinking. Like people are going to buy a diminished quantity of cannabis for the next few years. What they've said is it's unclear how it grows. I didn't read that report, but I would debate that I think there are going to be some actions that give people access to try new products, things like outdoor concerts that are licensed for cannabis beverages only.
Yep.
That platform for introduction has never existed. So people buying these things bought them like they went in and said, I'd like to spend $24 to buy something I never had before. That's not a great sampling pattern. So I think there will be catalysts to drive certain products. Canopy specifically, though, it lost 25% sales year over year.
Why do you
in
think?
A growing market.
What's changed?
Well, I think, if I want to be super successful in dominating the Polish market, right? Poland's a market. It's not one you might put like a ton of money into. But I bet I wouldn't do very well if what I did is try to run that from, say, Smiths Falls with people who didn't know very much about the geography of Poland or the structure politically and or whatever, getting on the earned media. And so I think what I'm seeing with Canopy is it's largely run out of Rochester, New York now, and I don't know who's in charge of Canada. Like who gets fired for losing 25% market share should be an answered question by that person's already fired. And so you only, when you're running a business that is a multi-market, multi-product business, you have to do it on a geographic basis where revenue owners exist in the countries where revenues have to happen. You can have science centralized, you can have all kinds of shit like that centralized, but people got to own numbers and deliver. And I'm pretty sure when you decline by 25% in a growing market, there's no amount of cutting you can do to actually catch up with that falling knife.
Yep.
And then at a certain point in time, like Canopy was built to be a global dominant player. It was like, think of it as a super large jet. And if you want to cut it down so it becomes a Cessna, that is going to become one seriously weird looking chop job. Like, how do you make the plane's wings that much smaller? And how do you take out like 100 seats? You don't. You should have bought a Cessna if you want a super little small thing. Or you got to operate it like it's a big plane. And that means you got to go for market share and domination by each segment.
I got to ask this question. Does this a part of you still feel like you'd like to be running this company?
Yeah, there it does, and the part of it is the part doing this with you. The only way things keep moving is if you stay in the conversation and keep pushing it. Talk about it, deliver it. Talk about it, deliver it. You have to keep it as the topic, and you have to keep the heat on the regulators. Like, I would be in a whole bunch of provincial offices pounding on the premier's table saying, we gotta have outdoor concerts this summer, cannabis cans only. We gotta have a tasting platform because a ton of Canadian jobs depend on it. And I bet if I was in the Ontario Premier's office saying that, pushing that, and showing where all those jobs are, they're in the places that need the jobs in the province. They're not working at Google in downtown Toronto.
Right.
They're working in Smiths Falls, making great wages for the local economy. And I think we'd end up with a great tasting platform, which will turn into an increased sell-through, which turns into a better reported margin, because you make a lot more margin when you sell things in milligrams in finished goods. Like, you can buy 10 milligrams of THC now for less than extracted for less than a dime.
I know.
If you sell the container, and I'd be cutting the price. Like, I think those things should be going out at $3.30 each. And you're still only putting in 10 cents of THC.
Right.
That's the kind of place where I want to play, because you got to just keep pushing the agenda and making the noise.
Good point.
So from what you can tell, Bruce, from the outside, obviously where you're at now, has the original vision that you had for Canopy, do you think they've sort of diverted from that? And if so, is it because of, some of the regulations never really came into play, or, international markets didn't open up perhaps as fast as some people believed? Like, are there extraneous factors of why Canopy changed their vision, if that's what you see happening?
Well, I think they did, and then a bunch of others did. So, for example, it is my view, and remains my view, that there is no cannabis company operating in any multi-market mode that should ever give guidance to the street what their 12 and 24-month top line, bottom line, margin model, and division by sales by segment of you don't know. So you know what you do by making up answers and saying them is you blow your brains out, and everybody thinks it's a gong show. You just asked me a question based on nobody achieving what they said they would. Well, nobody made them say it. So my view was, and I never gave guidance, I said that takes attention off the trade, and it's a nonsense answer. So I got fired for a variety of reasons. One of them was that I said it's a nonsense answer. Giving guidance when you're trying to accelerate so that your fourth quarter at least beats the prior year's sales, giving guidance in that circumstance has the probability of being accurate that is almost immeasurably low. The effect of which is you're either going to super disappoint people or look like the biggest sandbagger.
Right.
And so when you start from that perspective of putting the noose around your neck, the next thing you can't do then is kill the ability to be innovative and have a science-driven agenda, because you will have no new products, and new products are exactly what people always walk into the same store and they don't always buy exactly the same thing. And so what you have to have is a reason they bought what they bought before, and give them something new to buy pretty often. And that's an expenditure on science. And that expands your addressable opportunity to go to veterinarian stuff, to go global. But I just never understand why any of them started giving guidance and blew the credibility of the potential.
This is great.
Now, do you sort of a follow-up question to this? Do you ever remain in contact with maybe some of the folks at Constellation? I know it's through your contacts on LinkedIn that originally brought that deal together, brought both companies, and led to that deal. Do you ever
I've
talk to those
had a couple of
folks?
conversations, but the weird thing is, I was there for 8 days, 8 months, 2 days, and 3 hours from the time that we convened the first board meeting till the board meeting was convened to fire me. And I don't begrudge them for firing me, but it doesn't exactly create a framework where, if they're in a bit sideways, like, they're not going to, their first call isn't going to be, let's call Bruce, the guy we fired, to see what we think his view would be on what we should do. And I would love it if that was the case, where we could actually debate and discuss and create some success formulas that may or may not have been resident in their brain. But I think there's a sort of a disconnect when you grab the steer and you go push the guy out the side. You're not probably going to go back and ask him for directions. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And I would have been happy. Like, I would have stayed around and gone over to Acreage, was my first choice.
Yeah.
Work with Kevin and kick some serious butt. But it is what it is. But I would be delighted, because the thing I would like most is that Canopy actually reascend to a top 2 position.
Yeah.
Measured by market share, revenue growth, and increasing the margin that they deliver because they have the real products that have margin embedded in them. I'd be super happy with that.
Brand awareness. Brand awareness is a big one, and that's what you had, right?
Well, yeah, we had a corporate brand, but I thought we were also developing. Like, I don't mind paying Snoop or having a buyout option on Seth or some of these things, or Martha, if they get you out of the gates and you control the resulting product. But I also think you got to spend a lot of money on genetics and evolution. Like, why is Cookie such a killer?
Yeah.
Because they drop a new strain with a new name and a new result, and the lineup needs to be managed by police. You got to have new.
And it's got to be good.
Yeah. And you know what? Even if 4 out of 5 are good, you got to have 5 a year that are in the game.
Yeah.
So people can compare it. Everybody doesn't want to say that one's just as good as the last one. They want to say, I like this a little better for that reason. Yeah, they want to actually, have the coffee table conversation that results after they've done the grind, they've done the roll, they've had it. Like, you need to have stuff there. So I think that, so the second question is Canada. And to me, Canada had a inability to get good retail access. I think that's more than remedied in almost every province. It still has a little problem, like in terms of actually how do you buy a volume of canned beverages and shit without having to take the first 4 to your car and then go back into the store and buy more. They'll get through that. I think probably that it's actually going not terrible in Canada.
Yeah.
What happened was Health Canada said, you know what, 500 licensed producers isn't enough. And Health Canada said, what we really need is about 80% of the total volume of licenses to be outdoor grow, even though we used to have rules that you should have it secure and not stinking up the neighborhood. Now, like, Christ, you could accidentally walk into the field for half these places, and I can tell you there's no odor mitigation on a 100-acre field. And so what I feel is the single biggest failing is the evolution of what is a licensable asset. And so that will flush through, but it was actually a mistake on the part of the government of Canada to not contemplate at what level have we done enough, and and when we make change to what's permissible, have we completely lost our place of origin?
Yeah.
Meaning, this was originally a controlled, safe supply. Now, if you plant your field next door to, an apple orchard, good luck with that one. Pesticide drift is everywhere.
Right. 100%. What's your take on the U.S. market? I was down at Benzenga back in April. Big turnout. There was a lot of optimism in the air. I think it was just people in general, and for the most part, happy to see each other after COVID. But a lot of deals and acquisitions, are starting to take place. Conversations in the background. We look at the midterms that are coming up in November, and rumor has it, obviously, Chuck Schumer is going to make one last-ditched effort to really bring cannabis or safe banking across the line. They have to, because if they don't, I don't even know if that'll save them from obviously what's going to happen come November. But what's your take on the health of the industry in the U.S. side, and do you think we get some sort of legislation passed between now and the end of the calendar year?
So big country, very different answer. Like, I don't think you could give me a cannabis production asset in California.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, for almost free, I don't know that I'd want it because it's such a messed up market. And what I mean by that is there's very little effort to manage illegal grow versus legal grow. Yet there's a higher cost of being a legal grow than imaginable when you're paying, full taxes on your operations without the deductibility of the expenses. So it's a unregulated market, in my opinion. Would I like one in Michigan, Pennsylvania, maybe the upcoming New York, New Jersey? Yeah, love them. One in Florida, yeah, I'd take that too. So I don't think they're all equal. I like the ones which allow you to vertically integrate and deliver a lot of value.
Yep.
But on the second part of what people have been telling me for as long as I was in Canopy and doing this, so I'll say 8 or 9 years, that in about 3 years, the feds are going to regulate this in the U.S.
Really?
And so that's at least three segments, 3 times 3 at least.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you ask that super awkward question, so what do you think that means? If they did federally regulate it, is it booze? Is it FDA? Is it states' rights? Is it interstate commerce or not interstate commerce? Will they create a new therapeutic guidance group that runs this because it's not booze and it's not food and drug? Like, what the heck do you mean when you say the phrase, they will federally legalize it? That is a vote. The public policy options, I think, are almost limitless. And so I'm involved with an entity that's trying to resolve and define what does that mean. So it's called CFCR. You Google CFCR, my name. We've spent a lot of time. We've been able to pull in like one of the lead guys from the Michael J. Fox Foundation, that kind of caliber of policy people around how do you access things. But I think that the definition of what it means is the problem, not the vote. Because if we could actually say, this is what it means, I think it would enhance the probability of the vote being positive.
Why can't it be clarified?
Well, it would take some level of intellectual effort to define it and then get everybody to coalesce around it. And now every day that each state operates independently, they're less likely to be welcoming of a federal regime if it's not exactly what they're doing. Right. So like Colorado probably doesn't want interstate commerce. They want to keep all they got and they don't want to give up a penny. I bet some of the Midwest states would say, I like federal legalization if we can be a producer and not have to be a seller in our own state, blah, blah, blah. So I think that what it means is the problem in part on the vote. If you took the uncertainty of what your resulting action of being, like, how can you be in favor of something when you can't answer the first three questions on what does it actually mean when you voted in favor? How will it be implemented? What will the impacts be on society? And how does this change the game? So safe banking is like, safe banking is like a low threshold. It says you can go to a bank, but it doesn't say anything about, like, do you have 100 milligrams in the can? Can you bring, when it's safe banking, can you bring your cannabis from any other state? So I think what Schumer is doing and what they're all doing is they're trying to say we're in favor of whatever you're in favor of, but we don't actually have a full view of what you're in favor of, but we're for sure in favor of it.
Can I get that quote?
Which is a very good political position.
That's a hell of a quote.
Like, as a politician, as a politician, you are in favor of whatever the person is that you're speaking to. Otherwise, they're less likely to support you electorally. So it is a very awkward discussion when nobody knows what the frick they're talking about. Like, they don't have.
There's our social clip of the week. The big takeaway. That clip right there, Bruce. That was beautiful. Ben, you're going to say something?
That's my take on it.
Yeah. I wanted to get a little bit more granular on Shadd's question and ask you, like, obviously we have different regimes in Canada and the US. It's more of a state focused model there, vertically integrated. Here it's not. But that being said, the U.S. market and U.S. operators have been hammered, just like Canadian operators, with like reduced margins, price compression lately, and the price action in the capital markets is obviously very similar. MSOs is down over 80% since its high 6 quarters ago, and all that. So my question is, despite the fact there's a different model in place, can cannabis companies become profitable? Right? Is it just have something to do with the fact that cannabis is a commodity, and even though you have different models, it just price compression, margin compression are just inherently a part of having a commodity, selling a commodity basically. If that makes sense.
Well, I think the commodity component is the dried flower or the biomass. After that, I don't think it's a commodity. As soon as you denominate it in milligrams, you begin to take it out of being a commodity and turning it into an ingredient. When something is an ingredient, it's different than a commodity in that it becomes part of a blended product. And products are unique and branded. And so I think that's still working its way through. But I would delineate it that way. Part of the problem of being profitable is 280E, which everybody who watches your show probably is aware of. But the fact that they cannot deduct their operating expenses from their taxable income makes it really, really hard to be profitable. Like, I don't know, I bet you would find that less than 10% of all corporations in America, maybe less than 5%, would be profitable if they couldn't deduct their operating expenses from their income before they pay taxes on their profit.
I know.
So that is a big, big deal. So if you just say, well, eventually that will get rational, I think what people should do is what Michael Lee Chin always says in his presentations, which is buy a stock you want to own. You're actually not buying something you trade. You're buying part of a company. So think about what companies would I like to own a part of, And I think you're going to probably put ones like, in the US, it'd be hard not to think you want GTI and probably some Cura, like probably some TerraSen. You got to pick your geography, some players, but those are the ones that I think you probably want to own when whatever goes down, goes down.
Let's touch on some of the companies you're involved with. Chairman of the board at Red Light Holland. Are you surprised at all? Like, I know there was going to be some mergers and acquisitions and some shakeups within this industry, but surprised at all in how this industry has performed and shrunk a lot over the past 6 months?
Well, so I'm chair of the advisory board. I don't sit on the actual board, but I did do my advisory work. I spent, I think, 3 hours with Todd and the CFO David yesterday. And so things got, it's like, it's the three bears: porridge too hot, porridge too cold, porridge just right. The porridge was pretty hot, so what we did at Red Light that was smart is we raised quite a lot of money. Not dissimilar back in the day when the BlackBerry guys were a super hot stock. The reason you can still use QNX and BlackBerry stuff is they said when the price was very high, let's put lots of cash in the bank account. Now they did billions, but Todd thoughtfully responded to the opportunity that we reviewed, which was raise cash. Then he's been very cautious about selling. So now we see something that trades at the value of cash. So I think a business that actually has any line of business is probably worth more than just the cash in the bank account. And so what we were talking about yesterday, what moves can you make that increase revenue on an aligned basis in a medium or short term? Because then even if you dilute a little bit now, you're not really diluting because the stock was only worth the cash. And so if you buy revenue and it's aligned and the stock goes up, that's your first of a few transactions, because then the next one you would do is you would do it so that you bought it, but it had to be accretive, meaning that you were paying less for a dollar of the next revenue than the revenue had. And the way you analyze that is you say, well, what's our market cap today? Back out our cash. Our market cap, that delta, is now driven by our last acquisition. So the next one has to be at a better deal than the last one. And that's how you build momentum on revenue and sales. So I think there's going to be that kind of tactical opportunity for folks like Red Light.
Let me ask you something. Go ahead. Continue.
Yeah. Well, and so for guys like Crezo, like I got my ritual. I don't know if I screwed it up. I have ritual somewhere in the background there. I was down in Nova Scotia last week, which is where they grow the ritual product at the Crezo Mernova facility. Killer facility. Great, happy looking genetics. So I think that one's going to
Are we seeing the same thing? A couple of tweaks, like record sales still trending that way?
Yeah, and the part they have had great quarters, great months. But what I really like is after we sat there is we came up with about a dozen things we can do that should just cause a lot more. Which means what? Now you take that top line growth in Canada. So for example, it comes back to keep having a new drop. You got to have a new drop, which means you got to drop off at least one strain. So if you drop 2 new ones in, you got to take one off the back. Let's schedule that in. Then let's start looking at a bit more automation, because you can take labor and put it to better productive use. Now that you know how you want to do pre-rolls, automate that a bit. You know how you want to package, automate that a bit. So you spend a little CapEx to get a better operating margin, and there's a bunch of places to pull those triggers. But that's one of the 3 engines in that company. As they shortly go to close the US-based Sierra Sage Green Goo, that one has phenomenal products, and what it needs is a little bit more channel work and maybe a couple more acquisitions that are similar or adjacent to it. And you start to have a very strong foothold in a bunch of US states. That means if that federal thing we talked about ever allowed THC in, that might become a pretty interesting accelerator for THC-driven products. And then we have the research in Switzerland, which is being switched from inventing products to perfecting products. Because when you buy a whole bunch of products, why not send them to Switzerland and say, hey, this thing is supposed to help my burn or my sunburn. How do I do a better job? How do I seal out oxidization? And so the Swiss people will spend their time optimizing products that are accepted in the market rather than trying to throw darts, which is inventing products. The big take. And so those are ones that, I like them both now. Todd, I still give him credit at Red Light. He's a super good listener, thinker.
Let me ask you on that, because I know Todd takes a lot of flack on social media. People question his, at times, some of his thought process. Was he too scared to make any commitments? The times when the industry was exploding. But what can you share the day-to-day conversations you have with Todd where you've seen him grow as a CEO over the past year or two?
Oh, so he pushes back now. Like a year and a half ago, Todd was brand new, super wet behind the ears. And so he was taking inputs from advisors, and he was almost like doing a mental vote. Like if I got 5 advisors and 3 like it and 2 don't, well, the 3 that like it are the majority, therefore I'll go that way. That was a bit more of the process. And now Todd actually intellectualizes himself and says, well, wait a second, what about this? What about that? And so I find his processing of an opportunity analysis is really upped. Part of the reason he gets beat up on social media is he can't stop himself being on social media, right? He is a social media maniac. So when you put yourself out there, you get slapped around. I'm not saying I love where that company is now in terms of valuation or execution against revenue. What I do love is the cash, the potential, and the willingness to think it through. So is it at a performance level I'm going, oh, terrific? But it is in a spot where it can actually go zipping by a valuation marker that people go, how the hell did they get there? I think so.
Now, speaking of valuation, Bruce, my last question here is pertaining to Red Light Holland is, I know they're the producer of psilocybe truffles, which is legal in places like the Netherlands because they're not the actual mushrooms. And I think the psychoactive content comes below what you would see or whatever. Or there's a gray area there that allows them to go through.
Properly making it illegal. Most places just don't get it done to make it illegal. So we like operating where it's not illegal.
Right. So there might be a gray area there for whatever reason. But my question is, do you think investors are sleeping on the potential of the retail aspect of the truffles or whatnot? Because most people who invest in the sector are obviously focused on drug development primarily. But I know Red Light Holland is a little bit different because you have the truffles and they also have the brand aspect of it. They make shirts and apparel and all that kind of thing. So do you think that model will work in the psychedelics industry? And do you think it could be exported to other nations?
I think it works as a first step. I do think that whether it's psychedelic or not, or therapeutic or just really good with a steak, there's a huge diversity of fungi. And so my thesis is that there's a continuity of benefit that runs across a very wide gamut. And if you start where Todd started, you have a more practical access to everything that's a functional mushroom. And so I don't care if it's for whatever purpose, whether it's like some of the ones that are supposed to diminish stress, increase mental acuity, whatever. I think he has a first step in a platform that could enable him to actually go across the spectrum, drive a whole bunch of revenue to it, and then use some of that revenue to push the public policy to be better enacted, whether it's St. Vincent or Brazil or the West Coast of America. But I do think that there's an opportunity to be broadly in the middle across that game. And I think he's well positioned for it.
So you think there's big opportunity just in key pockets across the world for him to thrive?
Yeah, for this psilocybin. And so I would simply add adjacent businesses, which if the rules change, you'd have a great production asset. But in the immediate term, you have a great revenue asset. And if people say, well, I don't know if, Chaga or Lion's Mane or whatever works. Well, a lot of people in Asia have been buying this shit for like a couple thousand years. And they've been using various concoctions to treat things with if you've got a fever or a stomach issue. And they've been focused on the eye, your belly, right? The biome, how your stomach works. I bet in 25 years, I don't think we'll have figured out a super better way to treat cancer and stuff, but I bet we'll start to realize quite a bit of stuff happens in our stomach that drives everything about our body, whether it's bone density to how your brain functions. And so I think that there's a window of realization that a lot of the Asian insights could be translated into empirical data, turned into great products, and people will take them. The hardest thing people have is a problem taking this stuff. And listen, we're all guys on this. This is a conversation I had yesterday. Women are smarter than guys because they seem to be more thoughtful in taking preventative things. Like, if I take these vitamins, they'll be better for me. If I do this cream, it will make me less wrinkled like Bruce. All that stuff. We're guys, it's like, okay, well, right now I'm bleeding to death, so I probably should do something is logically how our brain reacts to circumstances. So we're going to have a little bit of effort. And maybe it starts with women using these products that see a future and ongoing benefit from them, not the resolution
I think you have a point there. I think you have a point.
Yeah.
One last question I wanted to ask you, and I've never asked you this before. Take me back to August of 2017. What was it like the day Constellation basically hands over $5 billion? Like, what walk me through. What was that day like? Because I know that just changed everything overnight with this industry.
Yeah, so three things on that. One is surprise the shit out of everyone.
I was actually
There
on a
was not
country road. I
one
left the
leak.
city in Toronto, and my phone lit up, and I didn't even know what was going on. And I got a call from somebody that was on a management team from another company, and I was like, what happened? And I was like, you got that wrong. Like, it's 500 million. And they're like, no, it's 5 billion. And then my jaw dropped and I did a little swerve in the road. But anyway, continue on with your story.
So the first thing was,
And sorry, before you go on with that, Bruce, I just want to also say that I was on social media at the time, and I remember the chart.
Yeah.
You're trading right at the summer lows. There's a brutal summer bear market drawdown, and no one. And I remember thinking clearly, no one knew about this. Not one word. The whole company kept tight-lipped because it was right. Canopy was right at the lows with the rest of the sector. So I gave you kudos because no one heard a word about that.
So we did those two transactions, the 500 million and the 5 billion. There wasn't a single leak. So that's the first thing. When I think back on it, I believe that's how companies should operate, and it should be the benefit of all shareholders to be equally surprised. Second thing I think about is I did not enjoy the minute of the announcement. What I enjoyed was the minute once the cash was in the account, which wasn't until November 1st. And so, listen, it's binding, it's this, it's that, until the money gets pushed across the table. I didn't feel anything had been achieved other than we have a deal, it's papered, it's done. But it's
So November
done,
1st, once the cash comes in, was that the realization of?
Yeah, that was like almost when, you get the chance to then tie to your breathing and you go,
Yeah. Where do you think that?
okay.
And where do you think that moment ranks as far as like achievements that you've made in your professional career? Is that number one?
Yeah, it wasn't. Like I knew when they wanted to change the board, therefore they want to control the board. Therefore they wanted to do things that when it came to a vote, I would lose. I was completely thoughtfully aware of what that meant. And so, well, you know that it means you're going to have constraints. I didn't know the magnitude of the purpose, but I was immediately, I knew that my world would change, right? Because up until that point, until November 1st, essentially, it was a good idea if we thought it was a good idea. And if I wanted to do the idea, unless there was some criminality, which I never asked for a criminally active idea, I got to do when we got to do exactly what we thought. And that's very important. So that was a bit of a concern. And then the third thing I'd say, which went through my head, was I had a guy who's an investor. It was actually Moaz at Anson. And I get lots of calls, but he calls me, he goes, something he said, he goes, you saved them all, and I should call you Jesus, I think was his phrase or something, but you killed me because I was short on a bunch of these things because I thought everything, and that the whole thing just
totally
a corner turn, and if you were short shit, that was not like, but I thought I thought very highly of him because he didn't entirely sit in pity based on his own self-interest, but he reached out in congratulation. Because it is
so two guys doing businesses at different sides of the spectrum, but at the same time have respect for each other. Would you say?
Yeah, exactly. It's like the sheepdog and the coyote, or the sheepdog and the coyote. At the end of the day, see, George, you've done what you do, but no, I loved it. I think upon reflection, I don't know how people ran operating businesses during COVID that had multiple borders between the operations, and I would have struggled greatly with that because I'm a very much I'm on a plane so I can be at a place. I'm not on a plane because I love the food, and if you can't go to the places to do the things, that is a very different operating style. Like I'm happy we're doing the Zoom call. I'm also gonna be happy when it's over because I've done 2 other ones today, and I got a Canadian Olympic Foundation board meeting for about 3 more hours.
Yeah, I hear you.
They're exhausting. I don't find, I find, I went to Toronto and I interacted with people and I was like levitating by the end of the day because interacting with people generates ideas which actually directly can be translated into energy. And doing that remotely does not have any of the similar effects.
Now, Bruce, I have to jump in here. I know I said the previous question was the last question, but I can't resist here. How did you keep the deal secret? Because as we know in the capital markets, usually word gets out, stock pre-runs a little bit. But like I said, Canopy was right at the lows. The whole sector was dead. And then boom, like no one knew about this.
There's a few
How'd you keep
things
it
that
secret?
happen. In Toronto on Thursday nights, people who work in Bay Street tend to get drunk. And when you're drunk, you're more likely to not be as super secretive as you like. You go, hey, buddy, don't tell anybody. That is not
That
actually
happens,
maintaining
Bruce?
confidentiality. Yeah. So what we did is we did not have any of the Bay Street guys in the room, and the room was in the west end of Ottawa. So there were no possibilities that anybody would interact with us accidentally, meaning the law office at LaBarge Weinstein, where we sat for a month doing this. They brought all the food in. We never went out. We never went out together anywhere for lunch. We never had dinner together. Zero. So we had nobody in.
And that was by design? And that was by design?
If you stay off the radar, you're not going to get into trouble. And so we sat in the West End. We had our food brought in at lunch. This went on for like a month.
Wow.
Including weekends of negotiating. This wasn't like, oh, let's sit down for 2 hours.
Wow.
And so the effect is that, and we kept it very restricted. There was only 4 people in the company who knew what was going on with this. And nobody else, like, I think people, my assistant probably lied to people and said, like, I was in a hospital or something. Like, why would I disappear?
It's like a real life Argo.
Yeah. But so I think that the thing I took in part the most pride about was the fact that I thought we did a very fair deal for all shareholders because there was zero.
Good for you. Listen, this is probably the best conversation that we've had with you since we got introduced a couple years ago. But this was amazing. I appreciate all the just openness and transparency in a lot of this, because I think this is a type of conversation that I think a lot of people in the investment community have always wondered. And I think on behalf of Ben and myself, we really appreciate you opening up and telling us just a lot of that experience. So I appreciate the time.
Well, it's because you said the disclaimer. You said the disclaimer at the beginning. Like,
what size of shirt?
Bullshit.
What size of shirt you wear? It's on its way. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. And if you like this video, wait until you see what we have next. Some of the best thought leaders in the verticals that we cover, from cannabis and psychedelics to cryptos and NFTs and sports wagering. So if you want to learn more, make sure to click on that bell for all notifications, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.